Welcome to science class. My name is Miss Rillieux, and this week we will be discussing photosynthesis. If you joined me last week, we discussed ecological succession. But specifically, we talked about the difference between primary succession and secondary succession. So before we begin our session on photosynthesis today, let's review what we did last week. So we have a Venn diagram. We have one side labeled primary succession, the second side labeled secondary succession, and in the middle is what characteristics they have that they both share. So again, we have primary succession, secondary succession, and in the middle, we're going to put the characteristics that they share. So let's start with the first one. Occurs over a long period of time. Should we place this characteristic under primary, secondary, or do they both share it? Yes, they both share it. Succession is change over time. It takes a long time for that change to happen. The next one says, would occur after a forest fire. So would that be primary succession, secondary succession, or both? Yes, secondary succession always occurs after some sort of natural disaster, like a forest fire. Occurs where organisms lived previously. Would that be primary succession, secondary succession, or both? Right again, that would be secondary succession. Would occur after land is cleared by humans. Yes, so although secondary succession does have to happen after a natural disaster, it also happens after humans destroy land. So this would also go under secondary succession. Let's work on this other side, and then we'll come back. So would occur after lava cools and hardens rock. So would that be primary succession, secondary succession, or both? Yes, primary succession always occurs on rock. So when that lava cools and creates that rock, that's when we're going to see primary succession occur. The next one says no previous life. So out of primary succession, secondary succession, or both, which one, or do they both occur when there isn't any life or no life ever existed in the area? Yes, that would be primary succession. Because primary succession starts on a rock, there isn't any life there. So this answer would be primary succession. The next one says results in a stable climax community. Would that be primary succession, secondary succession, or do they both result in a climax community? Absolutely. The purpose of them both is to create that last climax community. So this answer is both. Now, they do start differently, but they end the same. The next one says shrubs and small trees grow. So which types of succession is where shrubs and small trees grow? Would that be primary, secondary, or does it happen in both? Absolutely. It happens in both. So at some point, maybe not at the same time, both successions will have shrubs and small trees at some point, just at different times. All right. So our next one says soil is already present. So out of primary succession, secondary succession, or do they both have soil presented? Yes, the answer cannot be primary succession because primary succession occurs on a rock and there isn't any soil there. So this answer has to be secondary succession. It always occurs on soil. And that really is the big major takeaway of the difference between primary succession and secondary succession, the presence of soil. Primary succession does not have any soil present initially. But because secondary succession occurs after a human destruction or natural disaster, it always occurs where soil is present. We have 3 left. So this next one says starts on bare rock. Would that be primary succession, secondary succession, or both? Correct again. That would be primary succession. And 2 left. Pioneer species include lichen and moss. Are pioneer species, lichen and moss, are they part of primary succession, secondary succession, or will we see them in both? Absolutely. We're only going to see the lichen and moss in primary succession because the purpose of lichen is to break down the rock into soil so that we can get those grasses, small trees, and other organisms. Because secondary succession already has soil, lichen most likely will not be seen there. But primary succession and secondary succession both have pioneer species. The reason that this answer is primary succession is because they specifically named the primary species as lichen. So secondary succession does have a pioneer species, but it isn't lichen. And then our last one says soil must be formed before plants can grow. Is that primary succession, secondary succession, or do we need soil, or do plants in both need soil? Yes, regardless of what we're talking about, plants, they need soil. So this is both. So as you can see, there are some vast differences between primary succession and secondary, but they also have a lot in common. So before we move on, let's review just one more time. Primary succession occurs when there is no soil. It usually occurs on bare rock. The pioneer species within primary succession include lichen and moss, and their purpose is to create soil. On the other hand, secondary succession has soil. Soil is present, but that's because it usually occurs after a natural disaster or some sort of human destruction. Now, both of them, things that they share in common, they both result in a climax community, last stage. They both need soil at some stage in order to get the plants, the grasses, the small trees, and then the large trees. And most importantly, they both happen over a long period of time. Remember, succession means gradual change. So this isn't going to occur very quickly. Now, secondary succession will occur faster than primary because of the presence of soil, but they both take hundreds of years. So now that we have reviewed the difference between primary and secondary succession, what we did last week, let's jump into this week's objective. So this week, students will be able to recognize that radiant energy from the sun is transformed into chemical energy through the process of photosynthesis. The question that we should be able to answer by the end of today's session is, what are the reactants and the products of a photosynthetic reaction? Now remember, reactants are at the beginning of the equation and products are at the end. Our agenda for today's session, the first thing we're going to talk about is, what is photosynthesis? And then we will label a diagram to show photosynthesis. We'll do a couple quiz-is questions. And as always, STAR test is right around the corner. So in preparation for the STAR so that you can master the STAR in May, we'll practice some STAR practice questions. For today's session, you will just need paper and pencil, real simple. But now that we have that out the way, what is photosynthesis? So photosynthesis is a way a plant makes food for itself. Remember, plants are also known as producers or autotrophs. So unlike us, plants do not eat other organisms. Plants make their own food. It is in the leaves that most photosynthesis takes place. But again, what is photosynthesis? So photosynthesis is a process by which the plant is able to use light energy to make food to form in glucose in the form of glucose. So the whole purpose of photosynthesis is for the plant to make food. And the way it makes food is by using multiple things, but most importantly, it uses solar energy, energy from the sun. So where does this all occur? Plants are so small, Miss Rillieux, trees. Where does this occur? So photosynthesis occurs in the green part of leaves. It captures energy from the sun, and this powers the building of food from very simple ingredients, carbon dioxide and water. So not only do plants need solar energy, energy from the sun to make their food, but they also need carbon dioxide and water. Once they have these things, not only do they produce their food, but they also produce something we need. They produce oxygen. Oxygen is a product of photosynthesis, and it's very important, if I may say so. So here is an example of a diagram of photosynthesis. We have light energy and water and carbon dioxide going into the plant. And then what comes out of the plant is oxygen. So again, this plant, in order to produce food through photosynthesis, it is going to use sunlight energy, carbon dioxide, and water. And once it has that, it will be able to produce its own food, but also produce oxygen for all of us. So what plants do? Plants breathe in carbon dioxide and they breathe out oxygen. Whereas we do the opposite. We breathe in oxygen and we breathe out carbon dioxide. So we need plants and plants need us. Here is another diagram of photosynthesis. As you can see, this diagram shows you that light energy, water, and carbon dioxide go into the green part of the plant, chlorophyll, and then it will give off the oxygen that we need in order to breathe, but also produce food that the plant needs for energy. Remember, plants like us are living organisms. In order to be living, you must have at least one cell. And like us, plants have at least one cell. So sunlight is absorbed into the leaf by a green pigment called chlorophyll. It absorbs red and blue light, but reflects green light. So it takes in red and blue, but what we see is green light. And it causes the leaves to appear green. So where is chlorophyll located? Because chlorophyll is clearly very important to the process of photosynthesis. So chlorophyll is located in chloroplast. If you joined me in the fall, we talked about the parts of a cell. And chloroplast is one of the parts of a plant cell. So chlorophyll is located in chloroplast. Chloroplasts are an organelle where photosynthesis takes place. So again, photosynthesis, the light energy from the sun, is converted into chemical energy. Remember, chemical energy is just a fancy word for food, right? That cheeseburger you ate for dinner, chemical energy. Or did you have a piece of chicken? Because that's also chemical energy. And the chemical energy that plants get, they don't eat chicken and they do not eat cheeseburgers, but what they get their energy, it is called in a form of sugar called glucose. So the formula, because we need to know the reactants and the products of photosynthesis. Now, again, reactants are what you start with, what starts the process. And the products is what's created in the chemical exchange. So the formula for photosynthesis is CO2, carbon dioxide, plus H2, water, plus the sun. So carbon dioxide, water, and the sun, they're all the reactants. And so then once the chemical equation occurs, the products are glucose, which is represented by C6H12O6. And then the second product is oxygen, which is represented by O2. So again, the reactants for photosynthesis include CO2, H2O, and energy. And the products for photosynthesis are glucose and oxygen. So again, plants are so helpful to our life because during this process, the plant releases oxygen into the air. And this is why we need plants, as many trees as we can, to enable us to get enough oxygen to breathe. That's also why we don't need to cut down our forests. We need our trees and our plants in order to release oxygen so that we can all breathe. Plants need us to release carbon dioxide to them so that they can make their glucose in the process of photosynthesis, but we need them just as much so that we can get the oxygen we need to breathe. So now that we know a little bit more about photosynthesis, let's sort it all together. So as you can see, we have 4 things that are going into the tree and then 2 things that are going out. So let's get started with the easy part. What are the products of photosynthesis? Yes, one is oxygen. Again, so important to us. Our product is oxygen. Can you remember the second product of photosynthesis? Right, for the plant needs energy. So another product of photosynthesis is glucose. So that would mean that we are going to take carbon dioxide, chlorophyll, sunlight, and water. And we need these 4 in order to produce glucose and oxygen. So now that we have what we need, our reactants, and our products, what we produce, let's see if we can describe each. So I will read a statement and I want you to tell me, where does this statement go? So this statement says, this and nutrients are absorbed through the roots to help photosynthesis. So the key in this statement is that the plant gets this from the roots. So what is the plant getting from the roots? Right. From its roots, plants get water. So this and other nutrients is absorbed through the roots to help photosynthesis. All right. So our next one says, people breathe out this gas to help the photosynthesis process. So what are you breathing out right now? Yes, you are breathing out oxygen. So again, a product of photosynthesis is oxygen. It is important. Let me redo this. It says people breathe out this gas to help photosynthesis. We do not breathe out oxygen. We breathe out carbon dioxide. So you breathe out carbon dioxide, but why or what is oxygen? Does anyone know? So if we don't breathe out oxygen, then what do we do with oxygen? Yeah, so we breathe in oxygen. So oxygen is what we need for breathing. We breathe out carbon dioxide, but we breathe in oxygen. So this card that says the gas that photosynthesis makes is important to humans breathing. So again, we breathe out carbon dioxide, but we breathe in oxygen. Our next card says, photosynthesis can't begin without this energy source. So what's the big energy source that we need all over the earth? Absolutely. The most important energy source for us on planet Earth is the sun. And then our next card says, this green substance is where photosynthesis takes place in leaves. So, where does photosynthesis take place? Can you remember? Right. Photosynthesis takes place in an organelle called chloroplast. But within that organelle is chlorophyll. And then last but not least, this is the sugar that plants use. So sugar is a food that plants use, and that is called glucose. So let's review before we move on. In order for photosynthesis to occur, we have to have 4 specific things. The first thing we must have is carbon dioxide. We breathe it out. And plants need that. The second thing we must have is chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is located within the chloroplast of a plant's cell. The next thing a plant needs for photosynthesis is obviously sunlight. It is that energy source that is needed in order for photosynthesis to occur. And then last but not least, we need water. And the plants get the water from the soil by using their roots. Now, once we have water, sunlight, the chlorophyll, and carbon dioxide, we're then able to produce 2 things, or the plants are able to produce 2 things. The first thing they're able to produce is their food, which is called glucose. And then for us, the most important thing that they are able to produce is oxygen. Again, we breathe in oxygen and we breathe out carbon dioxide. So now that we have reviewed what plants need in order for photosynthesis to occur, and we also know what is the product of photosynthesis, can you answer a couple questions? So number 1, where do plants get the carbon dioxide they need to survive? Yes, plants get the carbon dioxide that they need to survive from the air. We breathe it out. Go like that. And you just put carbon dioxide in the air. Most oxygen exits a plant through the blank as a waste product. Right again. That answer is number 4. What is the name of the part of the cell that photosynthesis takes place? So what is that organelle called? Yes, that would be the plant's chloroplast. What 3 things are needed for a plant to do photosynthesis? Yes, we need sunlight, but what else? Oh, you're right. We need carbon dioxide. But what is number 3? Oh, water. Absolutely. So the 3 things that a plant needs for photosynthesis is water, carbon dioxide, and sunlight. Carbon dioxide, water, and sunlight. In addition to oxygen, what else do plants produce during photosynthesis? They produce oxygen for us, but what do they produce for themselves? Yes, they produce their food, which is sugar, also known as glucose. Which is a product of photosynthesis that animals need to breathe. So a product that we all need to breathe. Not only animals, not your dog, not just your dog or your cat, but me and you too. Right. We all need to breathe oxygen. In what part of the plant does photosynthesis occur? Yes, photosynthesis occurs in the leaf of a plant. What gas do plants need to make their own food through photosynthesis? So they give us oxygen, but what gas do we give them so that they can go through the process of photosynthesis? Absolutely. Every time that you breathe out carbon dioxide, and that is exactly what plants need in order for them to do photosynthesis. What two products does a plant make during photosynthesis? Right. Photosynthesis has two products, and those two products are oxygen for us and glucose for them. So now that we only have a few minutes left in today's session, let's get into practicing for the star. It's right around the corner. So our first question is, which statement best describes how energy is transformed during photosynthesis? Which statement best describes how energy is transformed through photosynthesis? Is it A, B, C, or D? Can you find some answer choices that we should eliminate? Right, we should definitely eliminate A. Plants do not take in chemical energy. So if we're eliminating A, what other answer choice can we eliminate? Right, again, we can eliminate D, because again, plants do not take in chemical energy. So what would be the answer? Is it B, plants take in light energy and change it to chemical energy in the form of food? Or is it C, plants take in heat energy and change it to light energy? Yes, the answer to this exit ticket is B. The plants take in light energy from the sun and change it into chemical energy, their sugar, also known as glucose, for their food. So, as a review, photosynthesis, what you want to remember is that in order for photosynthesis to occur, plants need oxygen. Plants produce for us oxygen, and they produce for themselves glucose. Now, what they need in order for photosynthesis to occur is carbon dioxide, water, and sunlight. So again, you want to know what are the reactants, carbon dioxide, water, and sunlight, but you also need to remember the two products of photosynthesis, which are oxygen and glucose. That is everything that I have for you today. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.